things are heavy. Hi besties, thank you so much for clicking on this video. If you're new, hi, hello, my name is Tori. I am so stinking happy that you're here. Today we're gonna go through the 12 books that I read in August. How good of a reading month August was until I was sorting out my books into my star ratings, and I realized that I had 6 5-star books in August. So I always like to do my wrap-ups by my star rating, so we will start with the books that I rated the lowest for the month of August and then work our way up to the highest rated books for August. So the first one that I'll start with was my lowest rated book for August, and it was quite disappointing because this was one of my most anticipated releases for 2022, and that was Siren Queen by Nevo. This book follows our main character who is trying to get her break into Hollywood during, I want to say it was when it was first transitioning from black and white silent films to movies with sound. I don't recall if that was like the 1920s or 30s, like somewhere in that time period. So it is like old glamorous Hollywood that's depicted in terms of the setting, which was absolutely wonderful. That's probably my favorite time period to read about. In true Nevo fashion, there's it's like kind of magical realism, but I like to describe it much more as like surrealism because it gets very odd at times. She writes in a very unique writing style, and that's what I really love about her works. I love The Empress of Salt and Fortune, When the Tiger Came Down the Mountain, The Chosen and the Beautiful. Absolutely love those books. This one wasn't really for me because I just wasn't really connecting with our main character, and then I didn't really understand the maybe underlying themes or messages. At the end of it, I just really found myself not caring for it. I will say though, our main character has a couple like lesbian relationships and like hookups, and those parts were my favorite parts of the entire book. They were so stunning. Like, they were just stunning. So there are really good parts to this book. So 2 stars. Moving on to my 3 stars. The first one that I'll talk about a little bit is Every Summer After by Carly Fortune. This was our book club pick for the Confused Queens Book Club in August. Our live show is going to be September 11th, which is a Sunday. I will link our live show down below. I did enjoy it, but for me, the last half, or really the last 40% of this book lost me because I felt like the beginning of this book was so strong. I was so invested. I do love Percy as a character because I felt very personally connected and seen. We have our main character, Percy. We meet her when she is, I think, kind of starting high school or like in 8th grade. Her parents get this cabin by the lake they go up to every summer. She meets Sam and his family. They live right next door. So it's a story of really cute young love. Like, think about your first crush that you ever had. It was just really young, innocent, funny, awkward. It's the perfect summer romance because it takes place by a lake. She lives in an A-frame cabin, by the way. So she's living my dream. It's fine. No, I thought that Carly Fortune really captured young love very, very well, but this book has a dual timeline. We're jumping back and forth between their adolescent summers and then current day, where I think that they're late 20s or like 30 years old. The first 60% was so strong, and then from the last 40%, everything happens so rapidly, and I felt like we were just kind of jumping from the next thing to the next thing to get to the ending. Like, it just felt too rushed for me. So 3 stars. The next one that I gave 3 stars, and this one was another book that was quite disappointing that it was a 3-star read for me, was Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. This book was recommended to me by so many people because I love purple prose. Purple prose is like writing that is very overly ornate and like decorative writing. Very flowery, lyrical. At times it might be like just like over the top, descriptive. However, I felt like the writing style carried this entire book for me. I loved the main character. I didn't really like anyone else that much. I will also say, like, the foreshadowing in this book is not subtle. So you kind of know what's gonna happen the entire book. And I really didn't like that. Getting into my 4 stars, I'm very excited to start talking about some of these books. Okay, the first one I'm going to talk about is An Enchantment of Ravens. Oh, tabs. The first one I'm going to talk about is An Enchantment of Ravens by Margaret Rogerson. I know that this cover is kind of shiny, so I will try not to blind you guys with the shine, but this cover is so pretty. In this book, we follow our main character Isabel, and she is a prodigy portrait artist. She is a human living in the world of fays. But when she receives her first royal patron, whose name is Rook, and he is the Autumn Prince, she makes a terrible mistake and she paints mortal sorrow in his eyes. He returns to her and is coming to make her stand trial for her crime against him, but on their journey back to the Autumn Court, they're realizing there's something seriously wrong in his world and they have to fight for their lives together. And their relationship was so stinking cute. I'm a fae girly as well. Like, I love, 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 love fae stories. Queen of Nothing vibes is what Isabel and Rook were giving. Like, they were so cute. They're bickering. They're like trying to survive together. They're very cute together, like right from the beginning, but they do have like the cute bickering banter of what you get from like Queen of Nothing. I read this in August and it just put me into the fall mood. So as we're getting into September, if you're looking for a book that's really gonna just give you autumnal vibes, I highly, highly recommend this book. My next 4-star was Truly Devious by Maureen Johnson. Again, if you're looking for a book that's going to give you really just dark academia fall vibes, this also has a dual timeline as well, which is so, so incredible. I mentioned earlier actually that one of my favorite time periods to read from is like 1920s to 1940s. This jumps between the 1930s and current day. It is at Ellingham Academy, which is a famous private school in Vermont. It was founded by an early 20th century tycoon for the best and the brightest students around. When Ellingham's wife and daughter were kidnapped, the only clue was a mocking riddle listing methods of murder and signed with the frightening pseudonym Truly Devious. Many years later, our main character, Stevie, is accepted to the school because her ability is like true crime and solving crimes. She's very much like a Sherlock Holmes prototype character, and I'm obsessed with her. Her ultimate mission is to solve this cold case that has been cold for like over 70 years. I actually really, really loved the characters in this book. Our main character, Stevie, has anxiety, and the way that anxiety is represented in this book, I felt so seen. I thought it was actually a very accurate portrayal to anxiety, although anxiety kind of manifests a little bit differently for everyone. And the aesthetic, the setting of this book, like I mentioned, it's autumnal vibes in Vermont on an isolated mountainside. It talks about the foliage, Gothic stonework. There's Greek marble statues that are just scattered throughout the grounds of the school. So 4 stars. And my last 4-star read was My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Odyssey Mashfi. This book was such an experience. I know a lot of times when people describe this book, and they're not wrong, but they say we follow a very privileged white girl that's living in New York City. She has an inheritance. She has her whole life set up for her. She is a recent Columbia graduate. She works at a hip art gallery, but she's really just not happy with her life, which a lot of us would think, okay, if you have so much stability, you have so much privilege, like what could possibly be wrong in your life? And it's weird. Like, our main character is not the most relatable. She's not the most likable. She has very odd relationships with everybody in her life. She's very disconnected and she suppresses her emotions a lot. So the plot of this book is that this main character decides to, in a very toxic manner, self-medicate herself to hibernate for an entire year. Girlie's mental health is not well.
And she's also obsessed with Whoopi Goldberg. Like,
and to be fair, you know, those descriptions are very accurate of this book. However, I think it just goes a lot deeper than that. This book is so cynical, it's very pessimistic, and on the back it says both tender and blackly funny, merciless and compassionate. I totally agree with those things. If you're looking for a book where you kind of have to analyze the underlying themes of what's truly going on, I think that you would really enjoy it. If you mentally are not in a great place right now, I would not recommend reading this book. I thoroughly enjoyed this book. I was not planning on tabbing it, and I tabbed the crap out of it. I thought it was so hilarious, and I have a reading vlog upcoming called my Sad Girl Lit Reading Vlog, where I talk about this book in a lot more detail. So if you're interested, keep an eye out for that. And now we're into my plethora of 5-star books that I read in August. So the first one that I'll start off with, and I just finished it most recently, so it's very fresh in my mind, is What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher. I read this on my Kindle, so I will pop up a picture. This is a short story retelling of The House of Usher, written by Edgar Allan Poe, and it is absolutely exquisite. If you like Gothic writing, if you like Edgar Allan Poe, if you like Mexican Gothic and Silvia Moreno Garcia, if you like very grotesque descriptions, but it will actually give you the heebie-jeebies, pick up this book. I thought it was incredible. It blew my mind how much I loved this book and how quickly I read it, because I was so invested in the story, but also it literally gave me goosebumps. It gave me the heebie-jeebies with the descriptions of the fungi in this book. It was so gross, and also the way that the house was described, immaculate but also horrifying at the same time. And it really made me want to just take a dive into the deep end of horror going into September. It was the perfect book to finish August with. I can't say enough good things. This was the first book also that I read by T. Kingfisher, and I need to read her entire backlist. Like, what have I been doing with my life? My next 5-star was All's Well by Mona Awad. I also read this book in my Sad Girl Lit video. So this book, we follow our main character, Miranda, and she's not a happy girly. She's also a girly who is struggling with her mental health. Our main character, Miranda, is a theatrical studies teacher, and every year for a competition, they put on a play. Well, she has this feeling that her students are mutinous against her. She wants to put on the play All's Well That Ends Well, but they would like to put on the play Macbeth. In true Mona Awad fashion, our main character goes through an absolute 180 insane transformation, and the story just gets so weird. If you've read Bunny, or if you're familiar with Bunny, it's very similar. There is a very cyclical plot structure, so everything does have a meaning. Again, if you're someone who does like to dive a little bit deeper under the surface and analyze the themes of what's actually being commented on, I think you would love this book. I enjoyed it so much. I did have to look up an analysis to get a better understanding of what was going on and what was actually happening, and I'm so thankful that I did, because once I looked up that analysis, I enjoyed my read of the book so much more. It was so strange. You never know what's happening, and you never know how Mona Awad is going to end her book. Jumping to a very different genre, my next 5-star was the Stardust Thief by Chelsea Abdullah. This is the first book in what is going to be the Stardust trilogy. This book is based off the stories from 1001 Nights, and it weaves the gripping tale of a legendary smuggler and a cowardly prince, a dangerous quest across the desert to find a magical lamp. In my opinion, this mixed together 1001 Nights with Aladdin vibes. I need to preface this with, my impression of this book was it was going to be a YA fantasy. This is definitely a new adult fantasy. The brutality of some of the like action points in the plot, fighting scenes, some conflict scenes. There's swearing in this book. Like, just the subject matter is definitely much more new adult, and I think that that's why I enjoyed it absolutely as much as I did. It really gave me Saba Tahir and Ember in the Ashes vibes, but a little bit more mixed with Aladdin. There are Jinn in this book, and this is another book that I read along with the audiobook. Stunning. The 3 narrators who performed this masterpiece were incredible. Absolutely incredible. If you have the opportunity, or if you like audiobooks, I really, really recommend listening to the audiobook for this. I loved reading along with the audiobook because there are some words that are mentioned. There are some words that are mentioned that are of Arab heritage, and if I were listening to the audiobook, they weren't words that I was familiar with, so I might come out of the story a little bit because I wouldn't recognize those words. So being able to read them was very, very helpful for me. I was just looking at, this is the author's note that comes with the book when you get a Fairy Loot box. She describes this as a story about stories, and I felt like she did that so stinking well. Like, throughout this book, you get our main characters are telling tales of their culture, or like myths of their culture, and it was so good. It was so stinking good. And that's what she says. So she said, this book you hold in your hands is a love letter to the timeless tradition of oral storytelling and to the Arab culture I wanted to see more of on the fantasy bookshelves growing up. Inspired by 101 Nights collection and by the stories I was raised with as an American Kuwaiti writer, it is a book that is near and dear to my heart, and it is my absolute joy to share it with you. That's like what this was. This was a fantastical quest narrative that was inspired by her Arab heritage, and it was beautiful. I wouldn't change a thing. Read this stinking book. The next story that I'm going to mention, I'm holding up the picture of Dorian Gray, but I read the Canterville Ghost by Oscar Wilde, and this copy, this edition has some of his short stories in it, so the Canterville Ghost was in here, and I ended up tabbing it because I had to just underline some absolute amazing sentences of beautiful, incredible, stunning writing. Knocked my socks off. Like, this was written in the late 1800s, and you would think that it was written yesterday. It was so approachable for a kind of, you know, classic short story. It felt like I was reading a Scooby-Doo episode. It was so hysterical. I couldn't deal with my happiness from reading the Canterville Ghost. We follow this family that's moving into a manor that is known to be haunted, and it was the Canterville family that owned the manor. It's an American family, the Odyssey's, that are moving into this manor, and their interactions with this ghost were one of the best things that I ever read in my entire life. So if you're looking for something that's not actually very scary, but is still like kind of a scary story, it has the gothic vibes, I highly, highly recommend the Canterville Ghost. My last two, I finally read The Once and Future Wtiches by Alex Harrow. I actually did a reading blog for this book as well, so I will link that up above and down below. This book follows 3 sisters who live in 1893 during the women's suffragist movement. And they find that the women's suffragist movement isn't getting the traction that it deserves, isn't getting the support that it deserves. So they decide to take it into their own hands and join the Wtiches movement with the women's suffragist movement. This book was a little bit difficult to read at times because of the current climate of everything that's going on, at least in the United States, in terms of women's rights and women's reproductive rights. However, I'm so glad that I read this book when I did, because although sometimes I was getting really emotional, especially at the ending of this book, it was so beautiful. This is actually another book that, or another author that I think really represents purple prose. It is very, very whimsical, flowery, descriptive writing, but this is done so much better than Strange the Dreamer, in my opinion. So connected to the characters, such an impactful message and themes in this book, but the plot, oh my gosh. If you like a slower paced book, I think you would really, really like this book, because there are highs and lows of action, and then definitely a period of a lull, and then it gets back to the action again. Peaks and valleys, if you will. But yeah, it's a slower paced book. I love Alex Harrow. I think she's one of my, I've spoken about her before. She's one of my favorite authors. I've read a lot of her books at this point, and I'm obsessed with her. So 5 stars. And then my last 5-star book that I'm going to talk about is The Odyssey, which is by Homer, but this is the translated version by Emily Wilson. This is the first English translation by a woman. I'm obsessed. Never in the world did I think I would, first of all, read and finish The Odyssey. Second of all, understand what was even going on in this book. And third, be screaming and shouting this book's praises. This is, I talk about this book and I'm reading this book in the same vlog as Once and Future Witches. So if you do want more of my thoughts on this book, please check that vlog out down below. Holy heckin' Bob. If Emily Wilson continues to translate classic pieces of literature, I will absolutely read more from her. It was actually the booktuber Alexandra Roslin who recommended this book. Not just this book, this edition of this book, and I will be forever grateful. It's still written in the same format that the original Odyssey was written. However, it's written with like modern language, so it's so much easier to comprehend the story, what's going on. I love the dialogue. I hope to reread this maybe like a couple years from now and annotate it even more and hopefully pull even more out of the story. Alrighty, my friends, those are the 12 books that I read in August. I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, please be sure to give it a big thumbs up. If you've read any of these books yourself, please let me know in the comments down below. And also let me know what is the book you're most excited for September. Thank you so much. I'll see you in my next one. Bye.